Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I want to talk about this new 30-day minimum timeline that has been implemented by Adam Silver in terms of that's the minimum amount of time that the NBA is going to be suspended, and then they're going to kind of reevaluate things at the end of that 30 days. So in this video, I'm going to talk about essentially what that means for the NBA schedule and just speculating on some different things that they could possibly do to manipulate the schedule, to change it, to try and salvage what's left of this season depending on the timeline. So this is just working off of the 30-day thing that he said on TV yesterday, that it's absolutely going to be at least 30 days, and then we'll kind of move from there as well. I'm also going to be working on a video in the future in which I essentially come up with a handful of proposals on the ways that the league could restart, whether it's the way that they deal with the playoff seeding or the schedule, depending on when the league does or does not start up again. And that will be in a different video that goes more in depth into actual proposals in terms of things that they could do on a more systematic level. But this is going to be more about this 30-day thing that he mentioned yesterday. So the obvious issue here is the impact that pushing the entire schedule back a month has on all of these other events, because it's not just the playoffs and the regular season games that need to be played, but then it's the offseason, and it's the draft, and it's the lottery, and it's free agency, right? So typically, this is what the normal NBA schedule looks like. These were the set dates before all this stuff happened for this season. The playoffs were going to begin April 18th, then the lottery on May 19th, the combine the 21st to the 24th of May, the finals June 4th, the draft June 25th, and the free agency is typically in early July, somewhere around the 4th of July, right? Those are the normal dates. So if we're pushing 30 days beyond yesterday, that puts us at April 12th, which is 6 days before the playoffs are supposed to begin. Now, ideally in this type of situation, the NBA would play some regular season games rather than jumping straight into the playoffs for a couple of reasons. One, it allows the teams to, for lack of a better term, warm back up, right? You don't just want to go straight back into the playoffs if possible. You want to give these teams time to reacclimate playing with each other, get back into the swing of things. It would be very difficult for these teams and these players to just jump right into a playoff game or a playoff series. And then obviously there are teams that are not in playoff contention that thought they were going to be playing games the rest of the year, and you'd like to give them the opportunity to play a handful of games the rest of the way as well. The other reason is obviously for the seeding. You want to give some of these teams a chance to get back into the playoffs if they're not in it right now, or just see how all the seeds work out. And then, of course, there's the financial aspect. If we do get to a point in the next month or month and a half that the NBA is comfortable playing games with or without fans, there are financial implications of that, whether it be TV revenue. Then obviously if fans are allowed, the ticket revenue and the in-arena revenue as well. So there's a money component to this, whereas as I stated in a previous video, the NBA would probably want to play as many regular season games as possible and not jump right into the postseason. So let's just take this timeline and just say, for example, everything gets pushed back by an entire month. Let's say 30 days from now, the NBA says, okay, we're starting our season exactly where we were on the 11th or the 12th of March. We're just going to start it a month later. So basically that would push everything back to this. The playoffs would be May 18th is when they would begin. The lottery would begin June 19th, the combine June 21st to the 24th. The finals would be around July 4th, the draft July 25th, and then free agency would begin in early August, which at first glance doesn't appear to be that big of a deal, right? Because you could even say, all right, we're going to do free agency then. We'll kind of adjust when training camps are. We'll shorten the preseason. And then you could start the regular season in late October like you typically do. And it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It would be a shorter offseason, a shorter recovery period for these players. But pushing everything off by a month, just in terms of these events, there's obviously a lot of other smaller things that come into play here. There's the Olympics that may or may not happen depending on, how many players are participating there. I'm honestly not thinking that there's going to be an Olympics, but that's complete speculation. So it's not just these events you have to worry about, but I'm strictly talking about the NBA and the NBA schedule here. Pushing everything off by a month doesn't appear to be that big of an issue. Now, there's also always the option to push the start of the following regular season to December or even all the way to Christmas, like they've done in the past with lockout shortened seasons, and has been discussed recently up until this whole situation occurred, starting the season closer to December as a more advantageous start period for the NBA as it relates to the football season still being around and things like that. So that is always an option as well if they want to make sure they still have a full off season and they wanted to push the finals all the way back to August. Well, you can do that and then just push the start of the next regular season until December, either shorten the season or have the entire season run and just create this whole new calendar that then the league follows year after year. That's a pretty big undertaking, but it is at least an option. Now, as I said, the league would probably want to play as many regular season games as possible, and again, I'll cover this a little bit more extensively in a different video. They could also just say, okay, we're not going to do regular season games. We're going to just go ahead and start the playoffs as scheduled, and the rest of the calendar would be the exact same, right? Like, let's just say it's 30 days from now, and it's April 12th. The playoffs are supposed to start on the 18th. They say, okay, the league has resumed play. You can practice, you can scrimmage, you can do whatever for the next couple of days, and then we're going to start the playoffs on the 18th like we always would have, and the rest of the calendar is the same. That's not an ideal circumstance, in my opinion, for the NBA, because they want regular season games to be played, both financially as well as just for the competitiveness of these players. You want to make sure when you're bringing back the playoffs that it's a good product, and just throwing guys right into a playoff series, it might not be the best basketball. At this point, any basketball is a good thing if you can do it safely. But again, in an ideal world, they wouldn't just jump right back into the playoffs, but that is an option. So at first glance, this 30-day thing doesn't seem like it's going to be, all that dramatic in terms of the changes to the league schedule and to how things are going to happen whenever the league does resume. However, that's assuming that the 30-day suspension is the only thing that happens here, right? And I have zero idea. It would be complete speculation for me to say that it's going to be anything longer than the 30 days. That's the only word we've officially gotten from the NBA. But to speculate, it does seem like it's going to be a more extended absence. And the further along the suspension goes, and again, the league is going to be as cautious as possible in this, the further along that suspension goes, the more dramatic the changes to the schedule, whether it be regular season or postseason, are going to have to be. Whether it be the complete elimination of any of the regular season games and going right into the playoffs like I talked about, even adjustments to the playoffs like shorter playoff series to accommodate the shorter time frame so that they can finish up the finals on time and keep the rest of the events as scheduled, maybe even a shorter finals. What if we get to the point where, they really want to make sure that they are running the rest of the league on time, so they go to 5-game playoff series or 3-game playoff series? That seems unlikely, right? Because that's another huge loss in revenue for the league, whether it be TV or otherwise, because they're shortening what is typically, a prime time for them in terms of TV games is broadcasting all these playoff games, and they're shortening these series. But if it comes down to it, maybe that's the lesser of the two evils, depending on how tight this time frame gets, and that's a better option than just ending the season entirely. Now, that is a very, very dramatic circumstance if we get to the point where this is just a lost season, right? And they never resume for whatever reason. They don't feel comfortable, they don't feel safe starting back up the NBA or any of these live sporting events for a significant period of time. That is an option. I don't know how likely that is. There's no way for me to even begin to speculate on how likely that would be. But these are kind of the options that are being weighed, I would assume, in terms of the schedule. People like Mark Cuban seem very optimistic that they could just push everything back by a month, play the finals in August, and then figure out the rest of it from there. But no matter what, a complete suspension of the league for 30 days is going to, and potentially beyond that, is going to be a huge logistical challenge when things do start back up again, in terms of, how do you schedule all of these games again with all these different arenas that have these other events going on that may or may not be postponed or canceled. There's just so many logistical challenges here that if the NBA does resume this season, it's going to be much different, whether they have fans or not, whether the games are being played in only a handful of cities and teams are just coming together in 1 or 2 or 3 places to play these games, whether the playoff format is completely different, whether we just go straight into the playoffs, whether the league calendar is completely shifted and suddenly, the finals are being played in August and then they start the season back up in October or around Christmas. There's going to be some pretty massive structural changes to the league schedule, unless it really is only 30 days and they just start the playoffs when they do and then they just go from there. I don't know how likely that scenario is, and right now that's kind of the big issue, is there's just not a ton of information on where they're going to go from here, and I'm sure that's what they're doing right now, is just gathering as much information as possible to try and make as informed of a decision as possible. So we'll just kind of have to see. Like I said, I'll be coming out with another video in which I come up with actual proposals of what to do about the seeding, when to restart in terms of a couple of different time frames, whether it should be a month from now, 2 months, 3 months. I'm not making that recommendation, but it's more so when we get more information on when things could restart. Okay, how that could impact the schedule. You could do this, you could do that, you could shorten this, you could change this up. I'm going to be kind of working on a more in-depth video for stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to continue to pay attention to, but in terms of what this minimum of 30 days means for the NBA schedule, this is kind of where I'm at right now, right? Like if it really is only a month and you're pushing it off, it's not too big of a deal. Once you get beyond that, it gets more and more difficult with all these other events, and it is at least somewhat of a possibility that we just go straight back into the playoffs, or playoff series are shortened, or the NBA just doesn't resume for the season and they run it back next year. That is kind of the most dramatic scenario here in terms of how it relates to the NBA. But I don't think that that's an impossibility, I guess, is the best way that I would put it. But we'll just have to keep monitoring the situation. As always, I'll continue to look into stuff like this and try and get any information that I see out to you guys. But that's kind of where I'm at right now for this minimum of 30-day suspension by the NBA. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.